Hey everyone, Steve here with Phantom History. Thanks so much for checking us out on YouTube, and if you enjoy our content, make sure you subscribe. Enjoy this episode. The sun was setting, and Gina was investigating the familiar cemetery. She had caught lights and orbs and voices on the spirit box before, and she was certain she'd have another successful investigation. She is psychic, after all, and spirits tended to find their way to her, especially here. After some time, Gina looked up from her equipment and scanned the picturesque Indian Springs Cemetery in Punta Gorda, Florida. That was when she saw, gliding among the gravestones, what looked like a very tall woman with a stylish pile of red hair atop her head. But this woman was walking away from Gina and toward a large oak tree, and she was definitely not part of Gina's group. And the figure, definitely a full-bodied apparition, was dressed in 1800s clothing. Gina kept her eyes on the figure, which ignored her completely but continued to walk on into a pauper's field, as if to say, yes, this is where my unmarked grave lies. I'm Steve Blanchard. Welcome to Phantom History. Nestled along the coast of southwest Florida lies the city of Punta Gorda, which was incorporated in 1887 after the railroad extended south from Tampa, and it became a seasonal winter destination for vacationers, as well as a hotspot for agricultural trade and a boon for commercial fishing. Indian Springs Cemetery, lying next to the banks of Alligator Creek, is considered the second oldest cemetery in Charlotte County, and it's commonly believed that its name comes from Native Americans retrieving water from the small spring still on its grounds. Gina Leslie, a psychic who lives in Charlotte County, has studied the area's history and conducts investigations regularly throughout the area. And while the cemetery is very active, Gina believes that many who helped found this part of the state still haunt the historic buildings of the town quite regularly. That includes the spirit of Albert Gilchrist, who served as governor of Florida from 1909 to 1913, and who was buried in Indian Springs Cemetery in 1925. He was very involved in the spiritualism movement of that era, which may explain why his presence is still seen throughout the region. While working as a receptionist in a salon that was operating within the old bank building of Punta Gorda, Gina said she had her first surprising encounter with the spirit of the former governor.
I would open up and close up every day. And there was one day that I had gotten there a little bit earlier than everybody, and I was getting ready to make coffee. I went upstairs to turn on the lights, and I saw him standing full body in the upper deck of the, that I guess were the bank building office area. And he was standing in the middle of the office area, smiling, just smiling ear to ear, scared me half to death. I ran down the steps. And then, of course, I was like, I thought somebody had broken in. So I was like calling, saying, I don't know if somebody's broken in or not, but somebody needs to check. So we ended up having it checked. Nobody was there.
After sharing that encounter with her coworkers, Gina learned that paranormal encounters were par for the course in the building, and she found comfort in learning that she wasn't the only one who had experienced strange things there.
They had experiences too. They were definitely hearing footsteps, a lot of voices, disembodied voices, mostly male voices coming from upstairs. His voice used to come through the SC box when I was there, because after I realized it was him, I was like, I'm going to go back there and try to talk to him. And he was funny. He was cracking me up. He'd be like, hey, darling. And like, I mean, I'd get just really, really sweet, loving responses from him.
Gina has known of her ability to communicate with spirits for years, and she uses that ability so often that she says she has a few favorite spirits who still linger in Punta Gorda. Gilchrist is one of them, and another is the spirit of John Bowman, who served as city marshal at the turn of the 20th century. He was the first law enforcement officer killed in Punta Gorda when a suspect fired a shotgun through the front window of his home, instantly killing him in front of his wife and their 4 children. That suspect was caught and sentenced to death, but escaped prison after the Florida governor issued a stay of execution and was never recaptured. That could be why the marshal is still seen roaming downtown Punta Gorda, and not just by psychics like Gina, she says.
There have been actually like multiple young children who have had run-ins with him, especially in the 50s and the 1930s. His ghost would show up when kids were doing stuff that was bad, which I thought was very interesting. It was like if somebody was trying to steal something, his ghost would show up. And another experience, I think, was that one of the kids was stopped and her car had broken down and she needed help moving the car, and he came out and helped her. So, assisting and also stopping bad things from happening in Punta Gorda. From what I've read in the 1930s and the 1950s, all of the children didn't think that he was a living person, specifically because of the type of dress he was wearing. He had the big giant cap on that was old time from the 1800s. So I think people were very scared.
There seems to be a playfulness with the spirits in Punta Gorda, at least from Gina's perspective. They are continuing on with the legacies they created in life, so it seems, long after their deaths. But there are some who simply don't want to be forgotten, despite not having a marked grave in the Indian Springs Cemetery, which has served Punta Gorda since 1886. It was at this cemetery that Gina saw the spectral apparition of a person she thinks was known as Big Six in life.
It's basically there's a field, and there in the back right hand corner, it's all child burials. But then right next to the children burials in the very back, there is a pauper's field. No markers on anything whatsoever. It was a person in full late 1800s garb, um, very, very tall woman with red hair piled up in the back. And she was gorgeous, but very intimidating because she was 6'2", but it saw her flat out. Walking with her back towards us, walking towards the tree. There was a big giant oak tree back there. It's a heritage oak, and she was walking right directly towards the tree. I think that she was kind of trying to say that's where I'm buried, because I know Big Six is buried in the pauper's field back there. So I honestly think that that was a, hey, look at me, I'm here, and pay attention, come this way.
Big Six, as she was called, was a well-known madam in Punta Gorda who had a lot of secrets. She was often seen wearing provocative dresses and ran what the locals called a bawdy house of ill repute. She went by the name of Miss Ollie Brackett and had several girls who worked for her. But when she fell ill of dysentery, she forbade her employees from calling the doctor. However, when it was obvious that she was not going to recover, they contacted the local physician anyway, who, during an exam, discovered Miss Ollie was not a biological woman. When she died, even more of her secrets emerged. Gina shares the details.
I know the cause of her passing they had listed as dysentery, but they think that the dysentery was because of poisoning, long-term poisoning from opioid addiction, because that's one of the issues that happens with opioid addiction is problems with bowel movements. They did not call for almost a month to get her help because she refused. I think because she knew that she was going to get discovered. So basically what they did was they waited until the last minute, until she was passing out from her sickness. They called the doctor there, and on discovery, they realized, oh my goodness, this is the man. And then on her deathbed, she gave a deathbed confession, basically, of why she escaped, where she was from, who she hurt. It was a long story. She was, Big Six was from Gadsden, Alabama. And on the deathbed, she basically told everybody that she had pushed her cousin Tom off a cliff and escaped to Florida afterwards. Did not know if Tom had survived or not. He did survive, because the writer of this book, Ghost Stories of Punta Gorda, she actually contacted the family and got in touch with the family and found out like details about the life. She was kind of getting to Florida to escape from the crime. So that might be why she decided to take on a female persona. But from what I know, she did marry a man in Tampa, actually, which I think is really interesting. For a time, she worked for a family in Jacksonville, Florida, and was a nanny, but she got in trouble for partying too much. and they kicked her out, and she moved down to Tampa first and then put to Punta Gorda afterwards. So the marriage lasted 6 days from what I've been told, but she did get married under the name of Maria Dempsey. So different monikers. She actually, when her name was Big Six, she went by the name Ollie Brackett. So she's gone under a bunch of different pseudonyms.
Big Six, Marshall Bowman, and Governor Gilchrist may be some of the better-known spirits lingering along Charlotte Harbor in Punta Gorda, Florida, but they are certainly not the only ones, according to Gina. A collection of historic buildings has been turned into History Park, where locals and tourists can get a glimpse of what life of a settler was like in southwest Florida. This collection of buildings has created a community of spirits, for lack of a better word, and Isaac Trebu and his wife Virginia, who first called the area the village of Trebu, haunt an old office, as do some prisoners connected to the relocated jailhouse, Gina said.
There's this area in Punta Gorda where most of the old historical buildings have been moved to. And they've been moved from all over the place to one specific location. So that has created a very interesting energy in this place called History Park. There is the old land sales office that was Isaac Trebu's. His spirit is highly active there. They have the old jail cell that they have right, literally, if you drive down that road, you're driving right by that jail cell on the road. So it's a lot of energy moved from other locations that it should be haunting, but it's moved it to all this one little tiny center. It's interesting. You'll see shadows inside of the land sales office. That's the only time that I've ever encountered him. And then he's been very kind to me on the front porch. Like I'll go there with my little SB and I'll sit and I'll be like, "Hey, how are you doing today, Isaac?" And he's like, "Well, and you?" Like asking how I am. So I feel like he's not a dangerous or angry spirit. He's just kind of he loves his town. He's sad that it didn't go the way that it should be. I think every time people like mention his name, it helps his spirit a little bit.
While Trebu seems to be content in his old office, the spirits of the newly relocated jail caused some friction upon their arrival. Gina said she was tasked to provide comfort to the spirits and to clean the energy in a way she had not experienced before.
When I noticed the first time I had gone back when they moved the jail cell really, really close to Trebu's land sales office, there were issues. And I actually had Trebu come through and ask me to do Reiki, which is healing energy, on the location to make it better. I think that it kind of caused issues with the spirits because there were prisoners that were still attached to that jail cell that felt like they were guilty and they felt like they needed to do out their time still, which was really scary. And then it's right next to the land sales office, which Trebu and his wife hang out at. And they're just happy-go-lucky, loving spirits. So like loving spirits right next to jail cell spirits there's going to be clashes. Yeah, that was the first. That was the first. At first, it made me nervous because I was like, oh man, what needs Reiki? Like, what kind of spirits need Reiki? And when I was doing Reiki, you can actually hear audibly, like there was a female spirit that said profanity at me. She was not happy that I was doing that. So I don't exactly know what was going on because I couldn't see what was going on, but I felt it and I felt like she had to be pushed out of the area. It almost felt like she was pushed away from the area when I did it. I know that the spirit lady afterwards said thank you. And I was like, oh, okay. So something must have happened that she felt better after that. I've actually brought cookies and cakes before because Miss Trebu asked for a cake. I was like, okay, I'll bring you down a cake. So it's cute. It's like a little working relationship. They give me information on my SB and I give them treats and presents sometimes.
Punta Gorda is relatively small compared to other Florida cities. However, it's a popular tourist destination, especially its Fisherman's Village, a pier-turned shopping district that was central to the village's success in the fishing trade. That too, Gina says, has its fair share of ghosts, both human and not so human.
I actually worked at Fisherman's Village. I actually did a little stint there in a jewelry store. I worked there for 2.5 years. And during that 2.5 years, we would have jewelry flying off the shelves. And definitely seeing a lot of old fishermen down there. Lots of fishermen ghosts. Most of them are just kind of like milling about. There's a few of them that I've actually seen with lines in, but most of them are just like kind of walking around. There was definitely one that's residual down by the very end of Fisherman's Village that it was like a repetitive pattern. Every single time at a certain point of night, you would see this guy like walk by. Definitely in late 1800s clothing, but like ratty, just like everything was ripped apart. I actually saw a cow and it was see-through running through. It was probably about 10:30 at night. I was closing up the shop one night. I'm like, but it was a full body cow apparition. It was out on the main boardwalk that goes through. There's like little shops on either side of the boardwalk that go through, but it came right through the center part. And apparently it was a cattle dock at one point. I actually did research and found that out.
With so much paranormal activity present in this small corner of Florida, it makes you wonder what could be the cause. Native American burial lands, of course, are possibly a large contributor. Tribes inhabited all of Florida, and burial mounds and temple mounds are protected archaeological sites. But something else seems to be going on in Charlotte County, Florida, and Gina thinks there's a direct tie between the paranormal activity and the activity of recent weather events, namely hurricanes.
I think because it's been hit so many times by hurricanes that amps up the energy a whole lot. And it just keeps, every time we get a hurricane, it amps up the energy a little bit more. And I don't know if you know, but like we've had a lot of flooding recently in Punta Gorda. The last couple hurricanes have hit the place bad. And the energy, paranormal energy has definitely increased since then. So you go down there now and it's a little bit, it's almost uncomfortable sometimes because it's overwhelming. Paranormal entities kind of feed on emotions, and especially ones that are stuck. And when a hurricane comes, we're all fearful, we're all scared, we're all nervous. And I think that kind of fed the activity and gave it life. And I think that is what they get their energy from, and it makes them able to manifest a little bit easier when they have that energy to pull from. So I think that's kind of why it's gotten so active.
Thank you to Gina Leslie for sharing her time and talents for this episode of Phantom History, focused on Punta Gorda, Florida. This episode was written, edited, and produced by me, Steve Blanchard, and you can now find me on TikTok and Instagram as Paranormal Muscle Bear. Music for this episode was provided by Shane Ivers and Purple Planet Music. Remember to like and subscribe the Phantom History Podcast YouTube channel at Phantom History Podcast. You can also keep up with our adventures and the podcast on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And you can always visit our website, phantomhistory.com. As always, thanks for listening. Thank you for watching that. I want to remind you that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out all of the Phantom History content, as well as visit phantomhistory.com to watch more podcasts and learn about our adventures, as well as sign up for our newsletter so you will always be notified when new content drops.